Hey everybody, and welcome to the 13th episode of the Chainsaw Reacts podcast. Guys, I'm so excited because today I get to talk about Avengers Age of Ultron spoiler talk. If you have not seen Avengers Age of Ultron, this is your warning. If you have not seen Avengers Age of Ultron, step away from this podcast. Do not listen to it. This podcast will ruin a lot of great things about that film, so get away now. If you have seen Age of Ultron, if you have seen Avengers Age of Ultron, that glorious sequel, stay tuned, guys. I'll be diving into a lot of different things in that film. Don't bother checking the description, guys. I will not be labeling particular parts because literally we're talking about a lot of stuff happening within the film at random times. The beginning, the end, the middle, the half middle, whatever. We're gonna go all over the place with this film. So let's jump into it, guys. Let's not waste any time. Let's get into spoiler talk for Age of Ultron. So the first thing we're gonna get to, guys, is probably the biggest spoiler besides the end credit scene or the mid credit scene, whatever. This is the biggest spoiler out of the film. Quicksilver dies. And it was kind of a shock because the way that it was set up and the way that they gave a lot of character development to Hawkeye, on top of the fact, yeah, we got character development for Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, we got a lot of character development in this film for Hawkeye, and the way they set it up where he was going to go rescue that boy, and Ultron is gunning down, he's aiming those bullets toward Hawkeye, you're thinking Hawkeye is going to die in this film. He is going to die, they're going to kill him off, and we're basically going to have to deal with him not being in the film franchise any longer. And then all of a sudden, Quicksilver saves the day and basically uses himself as a human shield and prevents the bullets from killing Hawkeye and the little boy he was trying to save. Now, let's get this one thing straight. We saw his dead body on the kind of ship, the mini ship thing that the Hawkeye brought him upon, where all the people were getting saved from the island. But we did not see him getting buried. We did not see any recognition of him being buried or basically cremated or basically that he's just gone forever. His body was on the little floating boat thing to leave the island essentially that was floating up in the sky from Ultron. But we did not see him get buried. So that makes me wonder, is Quicksilver really dead? Because they have a serum out there, some kind of serum or something like that. Agent Coulson died in the first Avengers, and he was brought back in the TV show. Am I saying Quicksilver is going to be brought back into the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show? No. But that'd be a huge surprise if, like in the middle of Captain America Civil War, guess who's back? Quicksilver. They used the serum on another Avenger because Samuel L. Jackson, Nick Fury, tells Agent Coulson, we used that serum to revive an Avenger, which is you, Agent Coulson, in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show. So they have some kind of serum or something like that to basically revive Quicksilver, but that doesn't mean that it'd be a good idea because, as far as I remember, because I haven't kept up with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that Coulson's kind of weird after being revived from the serum. So maybe it's not for the best, but maybe he's just not dead. Maybe he just didn't die after all. They made it look like he died, and then we're gonna wait later to get a huge reveal that Quicksilver never died. Then it causes an issue. The impact of the film when he died was major on his sister and the rest of the Avengers. They were very upset about it, and it was a major thing to basically push forward the fact that they hate Ultron so much more because of Quicksilver dying, because of Ultron. Not necessarily Ultron meant to kill Quicksilver, but Quicksilver prevented Hawkeye's death, but they're going to blame Ultron. So if Quicksilver revives and comes back and he's there, whatever reason, the serum, he didn't really die, whatever, then the impact of what happens in Age of Ultron with him dying, in quotes, is not going to be that effective. But I think it's a pretty interesting thing. They killed him off, and Joss Whedon was actually asked about that after the film was released out, and basically was asked a question about, is Quicksilver really dead? And then he kind of just went, oh, we didn't see the coffin, we didn't see him getting buried. Like, oh yeah, we didn't show that. Kind of like Joss Whedon's kind of teasing us, like, well, maybe I did kill him off, maybe I didn't. But I think what was more interesting is that Joss Whedon did an interview talking about how when Aaron Taylor Johnson, who plays Quicksilver, was first meeting with Joss Whedon about playing Quicksilver, that Joss Whedon basically laid out a plan what he wanted to happen with Quicksilver. How they had this huge setup with you thinking it's going to be Hawkeye, and then at the end it's Quicksilver who actually dies. So it was a pretty interesting take. But I think that Aaron Taylor Johnson probably signed a multi-picture deal, so maybe the idea was to kill off Quicksilver to have this huge ploy leading up to the Hawkeye's supposed death, and it's Quicksilver, to find out later he's not really dead. I'm not really sure, but all we know for a fact that Elizabeth Olsen, who plays Scarlet Witch, has signed a multi-picture deal, which is pretty interesting, but I'm really interested to see what they do with the Quicksilver character because they killed him off, of course, but obviously there's many different ways they could bring him back in this franchise, in this cinematic universe. But who knows? But for right now, he is dead, and it was a pretty surprising, revelation, a big twist, if you will. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed his character. That's why it kind of bummed me out a little bit. But if it was Hawkeye, I think it would have made more of an impact. But when you get introduced to the fact that he has a wife and two kids and a third kid on the way, it's like, kill off Hawkeye. Oh my god, you're really putting a lot of people very distressed and mad at Joss Whedon for doing that and basically leaving his family stranded out there on the random middle of nowhere house. And so there's that. The next thing we're going to get to, guys, is the Vision. Oh my god. I talked about it a little bit in my non-spoiler review that I uploaded today on the channel. I'm recording this a day early. The Vision, the biggest surprise the Vision did, besides his intellect and basically him not really agreeing with the Avengers and not really agreeing with Ultron, kind of in the middle, where he was just like, it's not that easy saying if I'm on the Avengers side or Ultron side when he was first created. But the most interesting part is after his big, huge speech about talking to the Avengers and basically saying all these things about how, Ultron is unique, but he's hurting, and his plan is to destroy the world, so we have to destroy him. And he just picks up Thor's hammer and just hands it to Thor. What? What? Oh my god. Because they had a scene early on in the film where no one except Thor could pick up the hammer. Everyone was all having fun and games, but no one could pick up the hammer. Captain America, of course, nudges it. We've seen that scene a couple times before the film came out. He nudges it, but then Vision just picks it up like nothing and hands it to Thor. And that shows that Vision is literally on another level than the other Avengers compared to Thor. Thor is an almighty god from Asgardian, and he's an Asgard, and he's the god of thunder, blah, 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 blah. The Avengers, the rest of them, are either assassins, bow and arrow, a billionaire with a suit, a super soldier, and a guy who turns green monster. I mean, at some point, there's got to be a standout Avenger that's going to be completely different from those type of people. And so when the Vision came along, I was thinking that Vision's going to be powerful, but when he can just willingly just pick up Thor's hammer and hands it to him, that shows that Vision is not just some other superhero. He is definitely something more powerful than what we've seen so far in the cinematic universe. So it was just amazing. But Paul Bettany, I said in my non-spoiler review, but Paul Bettany did a fantastic job when his intellect, the way he spoke, the way he portrayed the Vision, it was just fantastic all around. There was one really funny line he did besides picking up Thor's hammer, was that I think it was Captain America and Tony Stark, or Tony Stark and a couple other people were talking and saying, well, I want a first shot at Ultron or something, and then the Vision, he's kind of blurry, but you see him walking in the background, he says, he hates you the most, talking about Tony Stark, and it was pretty funny in the context, because yeah, he hates you most, Tony. It was just really funny to listen to that. So the Vision was definitely a nice highlight. I knew I would like the Vision because Paul Bettany, I really enjoy him as an actor. I've always enjoyed him playing Jarvis. It was a great fit for him. I think his voice really is built for basically being the AI of Tony Stark. I mean, just the way he spoke and the way he basically sounded like an actual robot with Jarvis was just definitely mind-blowing. But him becoming the Vision, which Joss Whedon wanted to Paul Bettany to become the Vision, was just so perfect. And now how they set that up with Ultron, basically he wants to download himself into a body, essentially a Ultron Prime, if you will, because we were the understanding that Ultron Prime was going to be just another body for Ultron, like another robotic body, like in the comic books, I believe. But that's not the case at all. And that was a big twist that luckily the trailers never gave away, because what we understood that Ultron's going to go through different evolutions. He's going to start off with the really crappy body we see in like the first trailer or something like that. He evolves into the silver body, and then eventually he will level up to basically Ultron Prime. And in this film, out of nowhere, Ultron Prime is basically the Vision, but obviously it would not be the Vision. It would be Ultron in the Vision body becoming Ultron Prime. That was his whole idea of becoming this out of this world being, this like new god, if you will. And that's what Ultron was trying to turn himself into, trying to download himself into this Vision body. And of course, the Avengers stopped him. But that was a nice twist to see that. But the way that all of a sudden Thor comes back from his little mind games, which we'll get to in the next segment. I'll talk about the Scarlet Witch whole thing, but the way Thor came back and basically basically brought to life the Vision, that was pretty cool. But it was really interesting to see that plot twist where Ultron was basically downloading himself into the Vision body, and that was going to be Ultron Prime, and not another body. It's like the Vision body, so that was kind of cool. Okay, the next thing we're getting to, guys, is like I said, Scarlet Witch's mind games. Her basically her manipulations with the Avengers' head. It was really disturbing, some of them, and some of them were kind of interesting and just kind of strange. But the ones that creeped me out the most, of course, was the Thor's one, and we'll get to Tony Stark in a second because that's the most creepiest one. But the Thor one was kind of interesting because Idris Elba showed up. I can't remember what his character's name is, Himdall, something like that. And it was kind of a setup for Thor Ragnarok, and it was kind of interesting how they did that. And they also did a little bit of setting up of Infinity War with showing like the gems or whatever being assimilated together. I believe that was Thor's manipulation in his mind. Iron Man, Tony Stark's, that was the most creepiest one because you see like the Chitauri, like the huge black, creatures that were like soaring through like New York City, the big creatures or whatever, the worm type creatures, and they're just going through this huge black hole into like the earth. There's like tens and twenties and all this stuff and ships, and then all of the Avengers are laying there dead. And he grabs for Captain America, and basically Captain America comes back to life for a few seconds and tells Tony, "You could have saved us." And basically saying that Tony Stark is the reason why they all die. And it's another reference to possibly Infinity War, where Tony Stark at some point is going to believe he's going to kill everybody because of what's happening with the Infinity Gauntlet and all of that stuff. But it was really cool to see that. Captain America's was also cool because we got to see Haley Atwell, I believe that's how you say her name, who plays Peggy Carter, Agent Carter from the Agent Carter series, and she was, of course, in Captain America 1, and she made a little cameo there, too, so that was pretty cool, but that just shows that Captain America is not over this whole situation with Peggy. I mean, he is so deeply distraught with that whole situation of where he wasn't able to basically stop himself from being frozen. If he had it any other way, he would have obviously lived on and lived and probably married Agent Carter, but that never happened. So, but it was kind of cool to see her character pop up for just a little bit. But yeah, you could definitely tell with that whole manipulation that Captain America is still deeply hurt. Hulk, of course, we don't get to see what he sees. He just turns into the Hulk, Bruce Banner does, and goes ridiculous and goes bonkers. And that's where Veronica, aka Hulkbuster Iron Man suit, comes in. Oh my god, that fight was to die for. I don't know about you guys, but that is probably my highlight of the film, besides the ending when they're all together fighting the Ultron bots and fighting Ultron. Honestly, that fight is just amazing. Yeah, they showed the little the actual movie clip. They showed in the trailers a little bit of the fighting. Trust me, guys, you have not seen anything yet until you watch the film. That fight goes on for 10 plus good minutes, maybe a little bit longer. It feels like it goes on for quite some time. It's just a fantastic fight. There's a lot of cool shots that are not shown in the trailer that are really standout moments. And honestly, it's probably one of the best fights besides the ending. So definitely a big highlight in the film. And I'm really happy that Joss Whedon brought in the Hulkbuster Iron Man suit because we've known that for so long in the comic books. Iron Man has created a Hulkbuster Iron Man suit to fight the Hulk in case of an emergency, or in general they're fighting each other because they're enemies in the comic books or whatever story arc they're doing in the comics. So it was cool that they did that. It's kind of interesting how they called it Veronica and not Hulkbuster, but I guess they just wanted to come up with a name for it. Or maybe in the comics some of the versions called it Veronica, or it was always called Veronica, and people just coined it as Hulkbuster. I'm not really sure, but anyways, yeah, it was just an amazing fight to watch and just beautifully done. I like the beginning of the film. We'll get to some of the spoilers, but the beginning of the film when they're all together fighting basically some more of the Hydra people, and this is where the first introduction of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch is in the film, and so that was pretty cool to see that. But obviously the beginning of the film was basically made to show that these are, this is how they work together. This is how the Avengers are working together now. This is how they are basically coordinating how they're going to take over this, like, this place and all this stuff, and how they're going to basically be the Avengers, and not to be like a bunch of individuals kind of working together. They're actually being a team, and it's really interesting to see that. It was kind of interesting as well to see how Tony Stark, Iron Man, kind of goes off by himself and gets the scepter back, and it was just him by himself. So he kind of, went through the whole the mind situation for the first time. He was the first person with Scarlet Witch, but Scarlet Witch just let him walk away because she saw in his head that he was going to do anything he could to stop the world, to save the world, but also kill the Avengers or something like that to the extent. So she let him walk away, but he really got just really messed up with that. But then, of course, when he grabs that scepter, he's thinking to himself, "Yeah, let me and let me and Mark Ruffalo, Bruce Banner, let's look it over. Let's look the scepter over." And then, as soon as he's looking the scepter over, he's just like, I can make the Ultron program," which this is also another really cool thing I do want to get into a little bit. I like the fact that they came up with a very unique way of introducing Ultron without Hank Pym or Ant-Man at all. Because in the comics, a lot of versions, or maybe all the versions of Ultron, Hank Pym, aka Ant-Man, created Ultron in some kind of way. I'm not really sure because I've never read any of the Ultron comics, so this was kind of my first introduction to the character in the film, because I have not really been keeping up the comic books as of late. But of course, I do read comics from time to time, but not the Ultron Avengers one. But the way that they brought it up was that that the scepter was going to be used to create a basically artificial intelligence, aka the Ultron program, where basically they're robots you get to see in the beginning of the film that are kind of like flying around. They're not like Iron Man suits, they're like Iron Man suits but with full robotic capabilities, and they're full robots, and they were just kind of used to tell people, step away, this is a very dangerous place, step away. They're not fighting, but he wants to basically create robots essentially that are Ultron but good. He wants to make robots that will be able to basically do all the things the Avengers can do, and the Avengers don't have to be together anymore. They can basically be off by themselves. They can be where they can do whatever they want to do. They don't have to worry about saving the world. You create the Ultron program, you create these Ultron bots, then there you go. That was his whole mindset, and of course he had to talk Bruce Banner into it, but once he did, it went downhill from there, because it was so weird. It was so convenient. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it was just so convenient that Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark, was not in the room, and it was like, this version works, and now Ultron is going to be here, and then Ultron completely flips. Now, a lot of people have claimed that this was rushed, and that Ultron was basically, he went from basically being confused, and he doesn't know what's going on, to be like, I hate the Avengers, we need to stop this world, blah, 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 we need to kill off everybody, we need to cause, global extinction. Very fastly. People thought that he should not have been like that. He should have not rushed, and they should have not rushed that. But at the same time, do you want 25 minutes into the film, do you want all of a sudden Ultron to be created and he's good for about 30 minutes, and then he changes, and then like the half of the film is basically him good, and then the rest of the half is him bad? No, we need to get right to the point. Ultron went on the internet, essentially. People are making jokes. Ultron went on the internet and thought, global extinction, there is too much bad stuff going on. So it was kind of funny to see that. Like, Ultron went on the internet and realized we need to kill everybody. So that was kind of funny, because the internet's kind of a bad place. But Ultron turned quickly, and I think it was very interesting, and I think it needed to be that way. It shows that Ultron's mind is set right on the point. It's set right on the dot. He didn't have any changes of thought. He didn't go through like, well, maybe I should do this, or maybe I shouldn't. He immediately, as soon as he was born, hacked into Jarvis's files and basically hacked into everything that Jarvis and the world knows, and basically decided global extinction. We need to do this because the humans, they're not changing. We need to evolve them. We need to destroy them and build anew. And this is what we need to do. And Ultron manipulates Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch because of their past with Tony Stark, which is really interesting. And I mentioned this briefly in my non-spoiler review for the film, about how their childhood story was very unique, because their parents died from a bomb, and then a second bomb was thrown in when they were 10 years old, and on the side of it said Stark, and I'm like, huh. And see, hearing that backstory, I'm wondering what exactly that is. I don't think it was Stark's father. It could have been his father when he was older in age, but maybe it was young Tony Stark who was basically allowing the military, I guess, to use Stark technology to basically kill civilians. I'm not really sure, because it didn't really get into that, but it's kind of an interesting lead off, and so there's that. But all of a sudden, it's kind of weird as well that not Ultron, that Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver kind of just didn't even really think about it with Tony Stark and say we need to kill Tony Stark to like we'll help the Avengers. It was just kind of a weird change, but at the same time, it was like if Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are villains in this entire film, then all of a sudden, like at the last 10 minutes, they completely change. It would be just kind of like a rush thing, like not a really rush, but like okay, they waited till the last minute to do this, so we needed to see the Avengers plus Scarlet Witch plus Quicksilver plus the Vision take on the Ultron bots and Ultron, and it needed to happen that way. But maybe at some point down the road, if Quicksilver comes back, who knows? But maybe at some point down the road, Scarlet Witch will eventually, or maybe in Civil War. I just thought of this. Captain America Civil War comes out next year, and basically what we assume is that it's going to be taking place a year after Age of Ultron or soon after in the timeline of the MCU, whenever. Maybe if Scarlet Witch is picking Captain America's side, and then she's going to bring out the story to Tony Stark and basically tell him why she hated him and why she wanted to take him out and all this stuff, and maybe we'll get a revelation of that little particular backstory we got in Age of Ultron. But who knows? But that was pretty cool that Ultron manipulated Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch for quite some time, and eventually they found out the real reasoning behind Ultron's plans, and they of course switched on him and turned against him. So very cool turn there in the film. Now, Age of Ultron, I really want to get into a couple of different things here. So Age of Ultron, like I mentioned earlier, was basically teasing and leading up to Thor Ragnarok. Teasing, of course, Infinity War. Oh my god, that mid-credit scene with Thanos getting the gauntlet and saying, finally, or fine, I'll do it myself, and then it's the end. He's now has the Infinity Gauntlet, and now he's going to go after the stones to basically make the Infinity Gauntlet. He has a gauntlet, he's going to turn it into the Infinity Gauntlet. Now, something came out today, or maybe it was yesterday, but it was being reported today that it's been official. There are 2 Infinity Gauntlets out there. There are 2 gauntlets out there. There's one in Thor's world, Asgard, and there's another gauntlet that I don't know where it was at, but Thanos found the other gauntlet, and now he has it. So people are wondering, is Thanos going to get the gauntlet and fill it up with these stones required to make it the Infinity Gauntlet? And is somebody else in the MCU going to get the other gauntlet and fill it up with I don't know what else? I think there's other 2 gems that are not accounted for. I'm not really sure what extent is going to happen, but are there other stones out there that the other person with the other gauntlet could possibly use against Thanos? I'm not really sure, but once that was confirmed that there are 2 different Infinity Gauntlets out there, it made me go, really? Like I didn't really expect that, because I'm not really sure if the comics ever had 2 gauntlets, maybe because one for each hand. But if that's the case, I mean, I'm just curious to know if they're ever going to use that second gauntlet, if they're going to use it against Thanos, and more importantly, if they do use the gauntlet, the second one that Thanos does not have, who's going to use it? I mean, I'm thinking maybe Captain Marvel, because they've kind of mentioned at the release when they did the El Capitan Theater or whatever, the October 28, 2014, the reveal of Phase 3 of Marvel, that Kevin Feige said that Captain Marvel is probably the most powerful person in the galaxy in the MCU. This is probably the most powerful hero character we're probably going to get. So she's probably more powerful than the Vision. So maybe she's the one who gets a hold of the other gauntlet and then basically uses it against Thanos. That's just my theory, but watch it happen. Watch it become true. I don't think Iron Man should wield the gauntlet. I don't think Thor should. I think this should get a very powerful being. So if it's not Captain Marvel, maybe Vision. Maybe Vision gets a hold of the other gauntlet. It's just got to be somebody that you can believe that they are taking the other gauntlet. And you can actually believe they are using this, and it's not out of their power range, essentially. So there's that. Let me look at this website here. Look at a couple different things. Scarlet Witch take over the Avengers. We got that. The fight between Captain America and Ultron on the truck was pretty cool to see that, but obviously there was more fights, better fights in the film. But Captain America taking on Ultron was really cool, because obviously Ultron could have basically destroyed him or killed him, but Chris Evans, Captain America, held his own. It was really, really cool to see that. Yeah, an unlikely romance. We'll get to that. Thank God this website brought it up. So Hulk and Black Widow are a thing. I was at first, when I saw that in the trailer that they were really close to each other, and I'm like, oh god, really? Like, they're gonna go down this road, and they really just made it really different. It made you really think, because when you see it in the trailer and you kind of think, okay, Black Widow and Bruce Banner have a thing, I'm like, oh my god, like they're gonna go all lovey-dovey, and then they kind of hint at it a little bit, but then when they're in Clint Barton's house, basically Hawkeye's house, when we get to that, we'll get to that whole family thing in a bit because that was a really cool backstory, but um, that Black Widow was kind of admitting to Bruce Banner that she's not allowed to have kids because of her programming and her origins. We get to see Black Widow's mind control thing. I forgot to mention that earlier, but yeah, her origins. I mentioned that in the non-spoiler review, so it's not like a big deal. We just got to see a little of her origins, but we're not really sure exactly 100% about her origins. But when she mentioned that when they inducted her and she passed, I guess, the assassin school or whatever, that she was basically sterilized where she cannot have children because the mission is more important than the child. And so there's that. And then, Bruce Banner admits, I can't have kids either. I mean, look at me. I mean, I'll turn into the Hulk at any given point. I'll become the Hulk. I can't have kids. I just can't do this. I can't have a nice life like this. And looking around at Hawkeye's house, the really big house out in the middle of nowhere, I can't have this. So that was kind of interesting. And then the Hulk at the end of the film leaves. He's hulked up. He's obviously the Hulk. He's in a jet, essentially a jet, like one of the I think it's the Avengers jet they used throughout the film. And then Black Widow's talking to him, saying, please, okay, big guy, let's turn this thing around, let's bring it back. And Hulk just turns off the intercom, and basically Black Widow's like, oh my god. And then Hulk is just sitting there looking out at the window, and Hulk is just like, going off wherever. And it makes me wonder, where is he going to be at? Is he going to be gone for the entirety of Phase 3 until Infinity War and they find him and bring him back? Or is he going to pop up in Civil War at some point where he just pops up out of nowhere towards the end and he's just like, I've seen some stuff, or he knows about something that's bad that's about to happen, but I don't know. But I think that was kind of interesting how they kind of ended this film with the Hulk storyline, where he obviously could have turned the jet around, came back, and stayed with the Avengers, but he decided for the best that he just didn't want to hurt anybody and he didn't want to go down this road anymore, that he's just going to go off by himself and basically escape. Because throughout the film, Bruce Banner and Black Widow were talking about escaping and walking away together and disappearing, and they never did it, and then Hulk decides, I'm going to actually do it, and he does it. So it's like, okay, well, where's he going to go? It kind of reminds me of the Ang Lee Hulk, the 2003 Hulk film with Eric Bana playing Bruce Banner, where at the end of the film, he's kind of in the middle of some jungle out of nowhere, and he's like, you won't like me when I'm angry, and then it pans up, and then, you assume he turns into the Hulk in this, like, random place out in the middle of nowhere. But that was kind of interesting, but hearing about how he might be in Fiji, or he might be somewhere, his plane might have crash-landed, the Hulk somewhere. But it's like he's just escaping. Bruce Banner wants to escape, and he just doesn't want to be bothered, essentially. So there's that. A really interesting thing about the ending, where we get to see the new Avengers. Let me take a quick drink, guys. My throat is drying up. But the ending of this film is interesting because we get to see the new Avengers. Because Thor returns to Asgard. Robert Downey Jr., a.k.a. Tony Stark, Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. He quits, well, he's quitting now until Civil War, so he's quitting. And then Hulk is in the wind. There's a new Avengers headquarters. I'm not sure if the Avengers Tower is still there. I'm pretty sure they can't use the Avengers Tower because that's technically Tony Stark's tower. And if he's quitting, why would he allow them to stay in his tower? So they have a new facility with the Doctor from Thor. I can't remember his name. He's in the film for a little bit, but he's there. Dr. Cho, who was in the film as well, who was brainwashed a little bit by Loki's scepter to help Ultron try to transfer himself into the Vision body. And I believe Maria Hill and Nick Fury are all together leading and working with the Avengers. Well, not leading, but they're working with the Avengers. And the new Avengers, as you're shown a brief little shot, and it's pretty cool to see, is Captain America, Black Widow, the Vision, Scarlet Witch, War Machine, and Falcon. So we have basically a new lineup for the Avengers for right now until Civil War. But it was pretty cool to see that. And then, of course, Chris Evans is like, Avengers? And then it cuts off. He didn't say really, but you see his mouth open to say assemble, like Avengers, assemble. And then it just ends with him saying Avengers, and then credits. So it was really, really a big tease there. But I'm really interested to see really where the next film goes. Of course, we have Ant-Man, but I don't think Ant-Man is going to have a lot of involvement with Age of Ultron. If there's a little bit of talks about the events of Age of Ultron and Ant-Man, that's probably as far as it's going to go. You're not going to see an Avenger pop up. Maybe in the post-credit scene for Ant-Man, you might get to see Nick Fury approach Paul Rudd's character and basically say, I want you to, I want to talk to you about joining the Avengers, because Nick Fury is working with them now with the Avengers in the end of Age of Ultron. So if the timeline is like each film is happening and then we have a big team up. If Ant-Man in the timeline happens after Age of Ultron, like all of the events, then obviously it would make sense if they're trying to reach out and bring people together to join the Avengers. So why not go to Ant-Man? So that might happen. But the big thing is the start of Phase 3, which is Captain America Civil War, which is in May of 2016, because that final shot at the end with the new Avengers, with Black Widow, Captain America, Scarlet Witch, Vision, War Machine, which I'm surprised he stayed because Tony Stark retired, and then Falcon. So that's the new Avengers. But when Civil War comes around, horrible words. I'm screwing up my words left and right, guys, because I'm so excited and I'm trying to get to all this stuff and not forget anything. But Civil War comes around. Tony Stark's going to be there, Iron Man, and not Falcon, excuse me, Hawkeye. There's so many people in this film, in this universe, and Hawkeye returns as well. So we have the new Avengers, plus Ant-Man might possibly show up. We have Hawkeye. We also have confirmed Iron Man. We're also getting Baron Zemo and Crossbones apparently into the Civil War, and apparently Bucky Barnes, Winter Soldier. Civil War, Captain America is going to be Avengers 2.5. It has to be. I understand they're calling it Captain America. It's going to focus mainly on Captain America, but I'm telling you, they have so many characters in that film that it's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be Avengers 2.5. Avengers Civil War. That's what they should have called it, and have it a 2.5 film in between, and Captain America is mainly focused or whatever, but it's basically Avengers 2.5. Avengers, Avengers Civil War, whatever. But whatever, they should have called it that. But yeah, so it's really interesting because Age of Ultron does not really set up Civil War that much. Age of Ultron mainly focuses on the not so much Civil War because it's coming soon, like literally a year after Age of Ultron. So setting it up could have worked and helped, but it didn't really matter because Civil War does not need setup. They've been setting up Civil War for quite some time because it's the events of Age of Ultron sets up Civil War. That's why the governments want to create this enact to basically, in order for all superheroes to work under them, and that the government controls superheroes. So the events of Age of Ultron affects that film. So they didn't really need to set up too much. They obviously could have teased a little bit at the end where the government is trying to get more involved with what the Avengers are doing, and that's how they kind of end the film saying the government's trying to kind of get really involved with what we're doing, and we don't want that at all. But that was not the case. Mainly, they're focusing on Infinity War. The gems. They got the Soul Gem in the Vision's head, the Gauntlet, and the mid-credit scene with Thanos. So it's just kind of like, Infinity War can't get here faster. The fact that it's a two-parter film makes me really wonder how it's going to be set up and how it's going to be delivered. But Age of Ultron has had so many fantastic things. Ultron, his character was beautifully done. James Spader did a fantastic job with Ultron. Everybody in the cast did great. I feel like Avengers Age of Ultron took a huge step in the more positive direction from the first Avengers film, and I feel like that Age of Ultron, I think, will stand the test of time amongst one of the best comic book films of all time, like of the Avengers and the Dark Knight and all that different stuff like that. But I think for right now, people are nitpicking because it's a sequel to a film that was praised by millions of people, the first Avengers. And when they see the second one, they really nitpick and they really are comparing. It's really just, I gotta say this. It is really just kind of strange for me personally. I understand if people do it, but I want to say this before I end this podcast. The last thing I will be saying here, guys, today, for this podcast, for this topic, unless we get into it a little bit later down the road with something else, is that people are comparing so much of everything from the first Avengers to Age of Ultron. The difference is that the phase one, the Phase 1 individual films leading into the Avengers, that Phase 1 was different than Phase 2 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The reason why the Avengers was such an iconic film, the first one, because it was the very first time in history that we got a bunch of individual films in the same universe of characters. Individual characters have their own individual films, and then we bring them all together for one big film, one big team-up film, essentially. And so it was a big deal. And of course, now the second time around, it's not as special and it's not as, amazing because we've already seen them together before. We're adding some new characters, and we have a new villain that we've not been introduced to in past films. But this is the sequel. So this is obviously, people are really nitpicking a lot, and I think that people should look at the fact that the Phase 1 films, the individuals, lead up to the Avengers, and it all cohesively works. Phase 2 was a completely different phase. They got darker in some of their films. Guardians of the Galaxy was darker, but at the same time it was a lighter, and it was a lot of fun, and it was hilarious. But you look at Thor, The Dark World, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Iron Man 3, they went darker. So of course Age of Ultron had to go in the similar light of the Phase 2 films, because the Phase 2 films led up to the Phase 2 team-up film Age of Ultron. Phase 1 individual films led up to the Phase 1 Avenger film. So they're going to be different films. So I'm telling you, Infinity War is going to be different, part 1 and 2, because they're both, two-part films, but whatever. Infinity War Part 1 and 2 is going to be different, I'm telling you, than Avengers Age of Ultron. It's going to be different than the first Avengers film, because what they do in the Phase 3 films, the tones they're trying to go for in the Phase 3 films, the way that those films are going, that's what's going to be seen in Infinity War Part 1 and 2. So I'm telling you guys right now, the way Phase 3 is set up, it's probably going to be even more darker, maybe even a little more grittier. Who knows? If that's the case for Captain America Civil War, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, with these films, if these films go a little bit darker than Phase 2 films, go a little more grittier and a little more realistic, and it gets really intense and really violent in some cases, I'm telling you, Infinity War Part 1 and 2 is going to follow suit the same way. So just expect that right now. And also, in Avengers Age of Ultron, yeah, Quicksilver dies. I'm telling you guys right now. Infinity War Part 1 and 2, I'm telling you, people will die. People will seriously die. They're going to kill off major characters in Infinity War Part 1 and 2, because they're going to have literally up to 20, 30 plus characters, if you're including main characters and sub-characters, supporting characters. With all of the characters they're going to be having in Part 1 and Part 2, sometimes they're in both films, sometimes they're in only one part of the film for whatever reason, story-wise, and having 30 plus characters, in a film at once is probably a lot of people. They're going to kill some major characters, so expect that now. So anyways, guys, thank you guys for listening to my rambling and my spoiler talk, talking about my thoughts and opinions on particular parts in Age of Ultron. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Peace out.